Welcome to OhioX's Tech Tour. This is our first event in a statewide series that we're really excited to be launching today, featuring the city of Cleveland and what's happening in technology in Northeast Ohio. We first off want to thank our sponsors for this series, HMB. HMB is a company headquartered in Cleveland doing business, or headquartered in Columbus, doing business across the state and beyond. And they help mid-market companies innovate and grow using cloud platforms and automation. HMB believes that you don't have to have a bottomless IT budget to reach your full potential. My name is Kris. I'm the president of OhioX, and today we're joined by four leaders in the technology and innovation space in Northeast Ohio, Cleveland. This is our tech tour, as I mentioned, 10 weeks. We're going to be having 10 events across the state, talking with leaders just like this. So hopefully this is the first of many that those on the line today will be able to join and can tune in and hear more about the great technology and innovation work happening across the Buckeye State. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we're doing this virtually this year. In the future, we hope to do it as a hybrid, in person, and then also virtual broadcast events, because what we hope to really get out of events like these are to help tell the stories of incredible work and incredible leaders that are happening in Ohio cities all across the state. We have a big state, a lot of big metro areas, and we hope that through better connecting, better promoting, and better sharing, we're going to be able to make connections that can help move Ohio's technology and innovation economy forward. So to start today, I'd like to introduce Jacob Glenn. Jacob is the founder and managing director of Genio, a boutique consulting firm offering strategy, execution, and support for industry-leading companies. Their capabilities and service offerings are focused on mobile solutions, Internet of Things, and Salesforce automation. Jacob, welcome. Thanks for being here. And if maybe you want to share a couple minutes, a few moments about who you are and what you all do at Genio.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kris. Glad to see this event happening, even with the virtual nature of it. Yeah, Jacob Glenn. I founded Genio in 2012, and we are, as Kris mentioned, focused on mobile, cloud, and IoT. So we work with a lot of great companies, some local here in Cleveland, such as Moen, for example, helping them develop smart products. And so that's what we do. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about anything we do or what's going on in the region.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining, Jacob. We'll go to Kris Beck next. Kris is the CEO of Proformex, which provides life insurance in-force policy management solutions to independent agents, financial advisors, and trustees. Their carrier and distribution agnostic platform enables customers to securely store, manage, and analyze their entire in-force book of business in one place. Kris, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Kris. Again, thanks for hosting. I think these are important conversations to have at the state level and even at the city level. So I appreciate everything that OhioX has done. From my perspective, I'm the CEO of Proformex, and I mentioned, or you mentioned, Proformex really makes software for the life insurance industry that helps financial professionals better manage their clients' life insurance and annuity policies. And so from our perspective, what we're working on is the life insurance industry lags behind many industries in terms of technology adoption. So we're really focused on building solutions that are intuitive and easy for our users to use. And so we've got some exciting things going on, and hope to be able to share some of that later today.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Next up, we have Justin Bibb. Justin is the Chief Strategy Officer at Urbanova. Urbanova is a public-private partnership for smarter, healthier cities. He leads the national expansion of this accelerator's proven model and educates leaders from Tulsa to Tampa on how to harness data to solve urban challenges. Justin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kris. Thank you for hosting this conversation. It's an important one, given everything going on in Cleveland and across the country. A native son of Cleveland, born and raised in the city. And, I spend my time really working with leaders to understand how to leverage resident voice to make cities better and to improve the lived experience of all residents. And, now at Urbanova, we're really focused on how do we help city leaders, technology companies, nonprofits, and other foundations really reimagine the operating model of a city, and how do you take all this great technology that exists and deploy that technology in an equitable way. And so looking forward to the conversation, and hopefully we'll have a good dialogue today.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. And finally, to round out our panel, we have Doug Wenger, who is the entrepreneur in residence at GCP Tech. Doug is a C-level information technology and business leader and is currently at GCP Tech, a technology industry advocate and support resource within the Greater Cleveland Partnership. They focus on building relationships and a strong technology industry within Northeast Ohio. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Kris. And like the others said, thank you for putting this on. I think this is a great program that you've got started. And also congratulations to OhioX for all the traction you've been able to get in a relatively short period of time. I've been impressed. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, a little bit of my background, maybe a little bit different trajectory, if you will, to where I had here, to where I'm at now. A little bit different type of career that I'm in at the moment. I was an enterprise IT executive for 40 years, 21 years with Kellogg Company in a couple different locations. I've lived and traveled extensively internationally in my career. And then the last, since 2001, roughly, I've been here in Northeast Ohio. For about 16 years or so, I was the CIO at Untitled Solutions up in Beechwood, formerly in Fairlawn. And we were a global manufacturing company of materials, basically performance chemicals and industrial fabrics and things that are used in a lot of products that we use every day. So about 2.5, 3 years ago, I left the CIO role and decided to do something a little different. And now the Chamber of Commerce approached me and asked me if I would help build the tech sector advocacy program for the Chamber. And basically our mission is very simple: to help support the growth of the tech sector in Northeast Ohio. It's pretty simple. We've simplified it, and that can be a lot of different things. So we get involved in promotion of existing companies, trying to attract new investments. But one of my big focuses is to try to connect the potential buyers of technology, people like me, what I used to do, with the providers. We have hundreds of technology providers in Northeast Ohio, hundreds of them. And some of them are on the call today. And it's very difficult for them to get exposure through traditional kind of cold calling and emails. So what really drives me is try to connect these organizations together, particularly through a group that I run called the Northeast Ohio CIO Forum. So we have about 115 CIOs that I work with, and they manage they manage or maintain about $6 billion a year in IT investments. And those are just here in Northeast Ohio. So I'm happy to be here, happy to contribute, and look forward to learning a lot from this distinguished panel that you put together, not including me.
Well, thank you, Doug. And I think a good place to start, since the first thing anyone would notice that this is virtual, even though we have 4 leaders from Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, just because of the realities of coronavirus and how that has shifted work. And some businesses were remote from the start and from the beginning and that's just how they operate. But a lot of companies have made that digital transformation or that digital shift, and they had to do it almost overnight, which there are certainly challenges with that. But I think it's pretty incredible when we look back at just how rapid that was and what the economy was able to do and how quickly. And that's largely because of technology and the leaders that are implementing it and distributing it to their teams. So to start, and Kris, we can go with you first, and then we'll do an around the horn. But what has COVID-19 from a technology standpoint meant for your business? Is your team still remote? How quickly did that happen? And how much technology was needed in order to make that shift?
Yeah, so I think for us, we are still remote. And for us, it just took a couple of days, right? So I think we're fortunate as a technology company, we leverage a lot of technology anyway, right? So in terms of just access to computers, we use Zoom, all of our business processes are handled through different software platforms. So it was very easy for us to really switch to remote work, and we've largely remained unaffected in terms of an operational perspective. We had a very smooth transition, and in some cases, frankly, even enhanced the level of service we were providing to our customers. So from our perspective, I think it was a relatively quick and easy transition. Although I do know that it has been more difficult. You know, I look around at some of my peers who are in other companies that may be more traditional, and that was certainly a much harder transition for them.
And then Jacob, how about your experience? Because as you mentioned, you work with businesses across Northeast Ohio and beyond, large and small, and probably everything in between. So not just from your perhaps team's perspective, that certainly included, but what has it been like for the work that you're doing with large corporations across the state and elsewhere?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, you know, for us, our work, I mean, it lends itself to remote work. I mean, you can develop software from anywhere. But for us, you know, we're a very culture-driven organization. And so I think it has been hard for us just to not be able to be in the office and collaborate on things the way you naturally do when you're sitting next to someone or across from someone versus when you have to schedule a Zoom call or do something like that to do it. So there are impacts. It's more work for me personally to stay in touch with my people, right? Again, you got to schedule a call versus walk over to someone's desk. But then for our customers, I mean, we're seeing some interesting shifts there too. You talk about large corporations who are typically very averse to remote work, have moved almost completely to remote work, and now they're rethinking what their standard operating procedure should be, right? So I think we're going to see continued shifts in that, but it has reinforced some stuff for us around culture and the value of being in person. And I think that we're seeing there are some challenges with not being able to have face-to-face meetings. As great as Zoom and all these other technologies are, there is I don't know if it's a trust factor, but there is a kind of an impact to that personal connection that you get from sitting across the table from someone.
Thank you, Jacob. And you mentioned culture, and that's something I wrote down for perhaps a kind of another topic, but just how companies and how leaders are ensuring that the culture remains strong, because not just from this technology disruption and to your point of doing it across Zoom as opposed to just walking down the hall and stopping in someone's office, but there's also that kind of that mental health perspective where we're living in the middle of a pandemic with a lot of other issues facing our country and elsewhere. And so the culture is an area that I'd love to get back to. But Justin, let's go to you of your perspective around COVID and work, because you have a very interesting story recently of having been in one of those large towers downtown working for a large corporation, and then you shifted intentionally working for a company that you're going to be remote regardless, because I believe they're all over the country and maybe headquartered out west. So what has that been like, seeing really two probably stark differences in a very short amount of time?
Kind of crazy. I'm one of those crazy folks who decided to change jobs in the middle of a pandemic. And so I got really accustomed over the last year and a half during my time at KeyBank of walking to work, the office late, and having that luxury of, going in the office when I wanted to. And I immediately remember, in early March, the bank saying, we're going to be remote indefinitely. And so, seeing Key make that shift and seeing the agility of a large company like a KeyBank do it so quickly and efficiently was pretty amazing. And during my time at Key, our management team was saying that they've seen some increases in productivity, innovation, particularly with the PPP loan initiative, of being able to really adapt to the moment. And then shifting to Urbanova, which is, a nonprofit startup based out in the West Coast, it's been really great to be able to, still see that agility with our, small but mighty team to get things done. And I think I'm a great case study in, I think, the opportunity for mid-sized cities like Cleveland to attract that, tech talent that's been largely concentrated on the coast, to, a city like a Cleveland, where I had the ability to kind of stay tapped into this entrepreneurial culture, but I can have all the great assets and the great luxury of being in my hometown. And so I think it's a pretty exciting moment for Cleveland and other mid-sized cities to really think about the future of work and how we can leverage our position.
Thank you, Justin. And then Doug, I'm sure you have a lot of former colleagues that you worked with in some of those really large corporations that have interesting stories and perspective. But then, as you mentioned, you work with CIOs across Northeast Ohio. So what has that perspective been like, both in your day-to-day life and work, but then also from that of the fellow CIO colleagues that you have that are shifting organizations large and small?
Yeah, sure. From a standpoint of the Greater Cleveland Partnership, I'd say the story is very similar to the ones that were just shared. The group had to pivot to remote work and working from home and Zoom and all that. And I think that went relatively well. But the biggest part of my focus is being to support the rest of the tech sector in the region. And one of my primary client groups is the CIO community. Interestingly enough, we were meeting once a month prior to the pandemic. And early on in the pandemic, I kind of made a decision. I'm not going to bother these people for a while because I have an idea. I know what they're going through. But shortly after the quarantine began, we started meeting every other week. I was quite surprised at how interested everyone was in getting together as a large group. And we had meetings that were north of 75 people, which is a lot considering that our base group is only about 115. So we had a couple of meetings that it was just rapid fire. Everyone was asking questions, sharing best practices, challenges in those early days, particularly the multinational companies that have operations in other countries. They had situations where people, parts of one country might be quarantined even more strict than they were here, and making sure that everybody was able to connect. They had situations where there were people that had left all of their technology at the office, only to find that they couldn't get back into that part of the region to get back to their office, to get equipment to work from home. So there was a very widespread, a very broad spectrum of challenges. Cybersecurity was a big part of the discussions. Then a few weeks later, it started shifting to how are we going to manage this on a steady state basis going forward? So you got into things like work practices, vacation, things like that. People that had vacation scheduled and they couldn't take them now, and things like that. It kind of got into the more human resource part. But it's been fascinating. We did a joint call with Columbus a short time ago, the folks in Columbus and the people that do what I do and the CIOs. And I have some statistics, maybe I can just share a couple of snippets, that the majority of the CIOs in the state that were on that call, there was 100 plus CIOs, the majority of them did not have more than 25% of their staff coming back by the middle of the year, which is now. And it started to creep up a little bit towards Labor Day, but I would say towards it, at the end of the year, it was kind of equally divided as to whether someone thought they'd have 25%, 50%, 75%, or their entire staff back. So there's a lot of uncertainty still out there.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And that insight of when people are expecting, I think, is a good transition into for those people on this call, because again, we're represented by organizations of all sorts of types. Kris, what is the plan for Proformex, and is it largely a wait and see, or do you guys, does your company have a timeline for kind of returning back to work? And then also, what are you seeing it for your customers as well?
Yeah, so for us, we are definitely in a, like Key, Justin had mentioned with Key, we're in a, we're working remotely for the foreseeable future. I think, we have looked at different options. We went back into our office and sort of tested it out to see how we thought it would work. And it ended up where, for us, it just, we're able to be more efficient remotely just because of if we have certain people on Zoom, it's more effective to just have everyone on Zoom anyway. So even if we were in the office, several people were still, in a conference room, so they could take off their masks, or being able to have to be on a Zoom call anyway. And so what we've talked about is really going back to more of a, if we need to be in the office for a workshop or for a particular session, because there is still value, as Jacob mentioned, in being face-to-face, that we're doing it more on a selective basis rather than just having everyone in the office. So that's really our approach to how we've been looking at it.
And then Jacob, for you and your team, and then also curious of how you're handling that and when there might be a return, but then also are you seeing opportunities to go see clients in person, or have they shut things down, which then have just kind of indefinitely just to kind of ensure safety and whatnot? So curious from both your internal team and then what you're seeing with customers.
Sure. Yeah. So internally, we have a couple people in the office off and on. So I'm in the office today. I've got one other person here. So we're really kind of watching the guidance of what's the right thing to do safety wise. But I've, my team is wanting to come back, kind of back to the whole culture thing is, they like being in the office and what they get from working in the same space as other people. So that creates a challenge for me in just kind of balancing, that guidance and keeping everybody safe. And so we are just kind of watching and kind of staying really flexible. And we're pretty flexible as an organization anyways. So that's just how we're kind of approaching it day to day, kind of how things are looking and adjusting as we go. But in terms of customer interaction, everything's remote. I think that kind of across the board with our customers, everything has been moved to calls and video conferences. A lot of our customers are remote. The ones that are in the office are trying to limit interaction outside of that group, right? So we're, everything with our customers has been either on the phone or on a video conference.
And I'll add, as the wanting to get back in the office, Jacob's office has a really nice view of Lake Erie, which is someone who lives in Columbus. We don't have bodies of water quite like that. So I get that. And having that nice view is a good reason to get into the office. So totally understand. But Justin, we'll shift to you and maybe from a couple perspectives. One, what you're seeing in your work and what that timeline looks like. And I know you're now remote anyways. But with clients, and that could be perhaps the country because you work with cities. But also I'm interested in your perspective because you're incredibly active civically in Cleveland. And I remember you were telling the story somewhat recently about some organizations you're involved in streaming meetings that hadn't been done before, but the turnout was incredible. And I think we're seeing a lot of those kind of aha moments where, you can do things virtual and in person and kind of combine the two. And so curious as to what your perspective is like on those two fronts.
Yeah, so from Urbanova's point of view, we've seen a lot of our conference and events be canceled for the year or move completely to virtual. We were planning a big mid-sized cities conference this upcoming October, and we've decided to delay that until next year. And so a lot of the interaction that we see in our sector with mayors, with other CIOs and other foundations across the country, a lot of that networking has completely gone to a virtual conversation. On the civic front, as a board member of RTA, I've been on the board for the last year and a half. We've completely changed how we've interacted as a board. We went from, having in-person full board meetings and committee meetings with in-person public comment to having every committee meeting being done on WebEx. For the first time in RTA's history, we live streamed our board meeting right after COVID on Facebook and had over 1,600 viewers. And it was a big priority of the Technology and Innovation Committee that I've been leading to help think about how RTA can really be a leader in the region around smart transit and smart cities and how to use technology to improve the rider experience. Now, we've had some issues with public comment in terms of moderating public comment on Zoom or WebEx, and we're working through those kinks. But I'm optimistic that we'll get that right and hopefully be a model for other localities and other governmental organizations throughout Cleveland on how to go virtual and how to maintain robust public engagement despite the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, because the public needs to hear from us now more than ever.
Thank you, Justin. And Doug, perhaps you can share with your work at GCP and for the organization itself. But one thing that, as I was listening to others, as we think about what are some things that Cleveland does incredibly well, and it's things like manufacturing and healthcare, and those types of industries are very much you have to be there in person. There's been shifts with telemedicine and being able to speak with your doctor over phone, but for hospital systems, emergency purposes, going in is still incredibly important. And then manufacturing, if companies are physically building things, which Cleveland has a rich, proud tradition of, what has it been like for maybe those types of organizations that you're seeing within your network, and how they're ensuring safety and using technology to continue progress and continue with their business?
Well, Kris, just give me 10 seconds because I didn't plug my laptop in. So there's
okay.
one of the challenges of technology. Okay.
Yeah, that's
sorry, everybody. I thought I had this thing all charged up. I just noticed I didn't. So there we go. Dead batteries aside, some of the things that I've heard from my colleagues, there's manufacturing organizations in town that are starting to use more virtual reality, augmented reality. For example, inspections of equipment. If they're making equipment and that equipment needs to have some type of human inspection, it could be electrical, it could be some type of mechanical inspection or some type of safety inspection type activity. It's interesting that they are now adopting that type of technology in the field to help augment those activities or those processes. So kind of like Christy was talking about, where they have processes and automation, and within their company, I think these manufacturing companies I'm hearing them pivoting to using more of these other types of technologies to enhance their ability to work more virtually. Another example that I heard or saw was they're using augmented and virtual reality for training, where there's some type of shop floor activity that is has a very specific training or operating protocol that you need to follow, and they're doing that through VR and AR. So that whole, I think the adoption of all that is kind of moving beyond. Well, when I thought of that early on, it was sort of like games and kind of more recreational type uses. Now it's becoming it's going down the shop floor. I saw a great demo a couple weeks ago from Case Western. They're using that HoloLens technology for training medical students. So they gave a demonstration to our CIO forum group in our April meeting. It was just out of this world. I mean, it was just something that you think about the potential. So you got healthcare, you've got manufacturing, you've got other processes that are adopting this. One of our finalists in Tech Week, which we'll talk, or for Best of Tech Awards, is a company that's using AR and VR for helping young children in the physical therapy settings, to give them exciting things to do and movements that can help them in their physical therapy, recovering from an injury or illness or something like that. It's really, really exciting to see.
That's great. Thank you, Doug. And I guess shifting the conversation a bit, one thing that has been in the news because of COVID is this almost exodus of people from major coastal hubs, New York, Silicon Valley, which in a lot of ways was there were shifts happening and people leaving because of cost of living, and it's just becoming increasingly difficult to buy a home. And for the cost of a home in San Francisco compared to what you could get in Cleveland, it's pretty stark and different. And a lot of people on this panel today, I know, have spent time working in cities across the world even. And so there's a lot of perspective there about what Ohio, what our communities, Cleveland in this case, can do to attract some of that talent. And so, Kris, let's start with you. And I know you have a really interesting work background, having worked at corporations of all sizes and all over the world even. But what are some things that you're seeing that perhaps Cleveland, Northeast Ohio can do in order to attract some of that talent that might be looking to leave, whether they were born in Ohio, went to college here, or just looking for an opportunity to have that great quality of life that we all hear so much about?
Yeah, I think that this is an important, evolution that's happening right now, accelerated by COVID. I think, I spent the first, 12 years of my career working in tech cities all across the country, lived internationally a couple of times, and ultimately came back to Ohio. I was born here, but came back to Ohio because it was such a good mix of, just work-life balance, and being able to, start businesses and grow businesses very efficiently. So I think that if you look at just the shift of, I know two people who've moved back essentially since COVID started from the coasts, right? And I've heard other people that, that's happening more and more. And when I talk to VCs or we're raising money, often there's a question around, can you really get access to talent in Ohio? And I think that Ohio and the Midwest is rapidly becoming a tech hub, and it's really just in its infancy. And so if you look at, there's a good publication that came out a couple of years ago around the Midwest, and, the Midwest is home to 150 of the Fortune 500 companies. 25% of all computer science graduates graduate in the Midwest, right? 60% of the country's manufacturing base is here. We account for 20% of the country's GDP, and yet we only have about 5% of the venture funding. So in the business that we're in, it's very lopsided. But I think we're still in the early innings of what the technology market will be in Ohio or Northeast Ohio, and where we can be positioned long-term. I mean, it's like I mentioned, it's more cost-effective to do business here. Access to talent is really incredible. And so given the momentum that we're seeing, people that are on the coast looking for work, and frankly, a lot of the large tech companies moving to remote workforce, or not really caring at this point where their workers are. I think that's going to be interesting to see that talent pool disperse, not only in the Midwest, but all across the United States, and how that will change. I think ultimately over time, how that will change, the access that people have to talent locally.
Jacob, what are you seeing with that? Because you're someone that has built a business in Cleveland. You're growing it, scaling it, and to increase that opportunity for more stories like yours, starting with an idea and building it and growing it into a company. What would, I guess, what are you seeing and thoughts on it in general, but then also what would your message be to someone that perhaps is even watching this today in San Francisco, who maybe grew up in the Cleveland area and saw what we were doing and tuned in, that they can, build companies like yours and replicate stories that you've built for yourself?
Yeah. I actually spent some time in the DC area living there. We decided to move back because of just the opportunity, the cost of living, the people in Cleveland. And so I may be biased in my opinion, but I'll share it anyways. So from what I've seen, a lot of the people that I kind of grew up with in my career, right? People who were part of companies locally here who have had successful exits, for example. Those people who were super successful in helping make those companies successful, I'm seeing now are my peers who have started businesses, or small groups of people who've come together in smaller businesses and helped scale them. So I'm seeing that success cycle just among we've had some incredible exits here, in the last 10 years. And those people who have been part of that are starting to spin out their own companies. I would put myself in that category. And so I think that it may fly under the radar a little bit because it's Cleveland, but a lot of that's happening, right? And there is an incredible talent pool here. Christy mentioned, you know, the computer science grads. I mean, we've got Case down the street. You know, there's Akron and Ohio State who have great programs. We recruit from all of those, and I find that the talent pool in Cleveland, I put them up against the talent that I've worked with on the West Coast or on the East Coast any day, because they work harder, they're down to earth, there's less drama. So it's a great place to start a business and grow it. And I think if you've got someone who's out on the West Coast who's trying to figure out what their next thing is and then they have an idea, it's a great place to land and build it.
Thank you, Jacob. And Justin, in your work, again, both civically, what you're doing in Cleveland, but then with your business, and seeing what cities like Austin and Denver, Nashville, and others that have been somewhat destinations for that West or East Coast exodus. What are some of the things that you've come across that successful cities are doing, or what are some of the efforts underway in Cleveland currently to perhaps recruit and attract some of this talent?
You know, I think the point about attracting talent is important, and I think we need, as a city, to be more aggressive about doing that. You know, I love what Mayor G.T. Bynum has done in Tulsa with the Tulsa Remote Program, where he's essentially, you know, pitching talent in San Francisco and New York to come to Tulsa, and they'll offer free co-working space and other incentives for them to stay there and be a part of Tulsa's renaissance. But, you know, I want to be clear that there's a ton of untapped talent in Cleveland, particularly in the underserved neighborhoods of color, that we are failing, and they aren't a part of the economic growth or opportunity currently, and they're not at the table right now. You know, one data point that keeps me up at night a lot is this notion of the fact that unemployed youth in Cleveland are costing us roughly $1 billion of lost economic productivity. And so if we don't find a way to make sure that we are investing in our own backyard, Cleveland will never live up to its true potential. And so that has to be a core part of this conversation moving forward, because attracting an Amazon is not going to be our panacea, but it's investing in our homegrown talent in Mount Pleasant and Buckeye and Huff and the Clark Superior, Clark Fulton neighborhood is just as important as going out and attracting the next big company to come here.
Thank you, Justin. Doug?
Ditto. I think from my perspective, and I see Courtney Diorio is on the line. She just sent a note. Courtney is a colleague of mine, a partner. Courtney, for those of you who don't know her, she heads up our part of our tech workforce endeavors at the GCP, and was a longtime executive director for Wright, and that brand name is still out there. Courtney and I have discussed this, and I'm excited that during Tech Week this year, we're going to have actually, and it's 6 weeks away, by the way, virtually, we're going to have a couple of sessions that are devoted to kind of career pivoting opportunities for people. And to Justin's point, one of them is designed to help veterans, help us employ and expose the opportunity that there's a lot of veterans out there that have technology skills that are perhaps leaving the military and trying to enter the civilian workforce, but also an opportunity for people who are underemployed, unemployed, or would like to get in the tech game. And that is a very, very broad spectrum of individuals. And Courtney is working very hard to put together a good program that morning on Thursday, I believe it is, Thursday morning, during Tech Week. And we'll be publishing this shortly. But it's an opportunity for people, and I think it's called getting a roadmap, like it's called the RITE, R-I-T-E, roadmap to tech. And I'm hoping, that's my dream, that people can come into something like that and walk out and say, you know, I got to bring my own motivation, but if I can bring the motivation, I now know who can help me get going in this game. Now, we're not the end answer to it all. We have a part to play, and there's others that have to play as well. But we're trying to focus in some of the areas that Justin's talking about to help people get started into the tech game. And I'm hoping that we can do our part in that.
Great. Thank you, Doug. And yeah, we'll be, I believe, working with GCP Tech on their Tech Week. And so that's something that we'll be looking forward to promoting and taking part in as well. And I know it's been shifted like so many other things from in-person to virtual, but that's the world we live in. And if that's our biggest challenge is doing it remotely, then things are going pretty well. But workforce development is a big area, and I do want to get to that. But Justin, you had made a comment that was really interesting about attracting the Amazons. And when Amazon was, as one instance, looking for their HQ2, that was making news in every city across America because everyone was hoping to attract, that second headquarters. And there's examples of tech companies putting their HQ2s in cities and throughout the middle of America, some in Ohio and obviously elsewhere. But I wonder if there's thoughts and perspectives from this panel on if that is going to change now that because of COVID, there is this virtual shift and companies like Twitter and others, Facebook and Google, have essentially said, either you have the option to work remotely, so you can still work for Twitter, but you can live anywhere in the world. If that will perhaps shift how cities, not just in Ohio, but across the United States, look at trying to attract tech, because maybe it's not so much looking to get that second headquarters, but it's more of just trying to get some of that remote workers. And if that shifts the conversation. So Justin, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that was something that I've seen and heard kind of over the past few months. And I heard someone that I was talking to someone recently who had lived in Silicon Valley, recently moved back to Ohio. We were talking about that HQ2 question, and they said that I don't think that's going to be as big of a thing down the line. It's more about getting those individual workers that can work for Facebook but live wherever they would like to.
I don't know, to be honest. I think we might see a shift in large technology companies going to the larger metropolitan regions. I don't believe that COVID will be the death of cities. I think people will still want to go to New York or Silicon Valley because of their history as being robust, vibrant places. And I think density is still a good thing. And once we get past this pandemic, people want to be congregated in the urban core. I do, however, think there's a finite window of time where mid-sized cities like Cleveland have a unique opportunity and a unique value proposition to go and pitch that talent, right? That software engineer who's tired of paying $2 million a year for an apartment in Silicon Valley and can take that $2 million of capital and get a nice home somewhere in the city or in the suburb or whatever. But I think that opportunity is here right now, and Cleveland's got to be a bit more aggressive in articulating what's their value proposition, why do you want to come here, and what's the real benefit of being in a city like Cleveland to be a part of our next chapter in our story. So we got a finite amount of time to make that pitch and to sell ourselves.
Thank you. Kris, Jacob, or Doug, anything to add on that?
I would just say that I think that what Justin said makes a ton of sense, but I also think, we have a ton of talent here and it's just not necessarily recognized. And so I think there's also an opportunity to say, like, the people who are in Cleveland, for the most part, like being in Cleveland, right? Like, I am the first one to say, hey, it's a great place to start a business. I love it here. We have all the things that some of these other cities market. So I think it's more of a getting the right people here, right? And so we have the talent. It's refining the story, getting the message out there that, one, there is good talent here to work with. Two, like, these are the things that you can get if you want to come here. And then I think that probably gets a good way towards what we're talking about.
We've had tech companies approach me and others in town. Part of my role is also to help attract. We typically partner with other organizations, either at the state or local level, in those endeavors. But I do know that's one of the questions they ask is, they say, tell us about the talent pool here. But they also want to know, are there organizations that they can partner with to develop talent? Some of the larger tech companies that I've met with have their own programs that they're willing to put in place if there's the people. So that's why the things I mentioned about with Courtney is important, to get individuals who want to get in the game, get them in the right places so that they can start that education. There's lots of different ways to do it. It could be secondary education. It could be, you know, some of the for-profit training academies or boot camps, and everything in between. So I think one of the things that we're trying to do is to bring these various workforce organizations tighter together, because that's what these tech companies, in my view, are looking for if they want to locate here. But I do agree with Justin. I think we do have there's a window of time here, and I think this could end up being a positive for a region like us if we manage it well.
No, I agree completely. I think you know, the window of time is important, but I do think that there's also a conversation around talent, you know, that Jacob was sort of mentioning, and you know, that we do have, you know, quiet successes, I would say. You know, we do have a lot of, as Midwesterners, I think we have a lot of, you know, values of where, you know, we're quiet, we don't ring our own bell, you know, that's sort of the culture, if you will. And I think in some ways, that, you know, it doesn't help us, right? We have, if you look back, there are a number of companies that have been very successful and that have had great exits and great outcomes. And it's, you know, relatively pretty quiet. You know, I think you look at Highland Software, they're one of the largest, you know, enterprise tech companies that exist, and they're sort of like a little secret. And so I think that, you know, some of the companies that we have that have made really good progress also, you know, could be bigger partners with the city and government to sort of really push that envelope. Now, I will say, you know, one of the things is there's a competitive advantage there, right? So they don't have to fight for talent with other companies. And so that is an advantage. And so, you know, it's a double-edged sword, but these are not easy problems. But I think, you know, the good thing is, I think, you know, whether it's the public or private community, we're all starting to really think about it.
That's great. Thank you all. And I think one of the most interesting that I didn't even know this before we started, but I've now seen it and heard it through the words of everyone, is that everyone on this panel, and even myself included, have spent time outside of Ohio before then returning home. And that's something that we at OhioX and I see talking with tech leaders across the state. We've probably had about 10 or so different virtual events over the past couple months. And again, as we're having more of these OhioX ones, and I would say there's probably a 70 to 80% rate of people that have taken part and are sharing their stories, but have stories like everyone on here that grew up here, maybe went to college here, left for a few years. Justin, you were in London, and Jacob, you were in DC, and Doug and Kris, you've spent your careers in a lot of places. And there's something great about that, I think, because we can all bring something back that we've learned in connections and establishing more of these pipelines to large hubs. And so I think that recruitment of that boomerang talent, to some of the other comments of how do we attract those people to Ohio that spent 5, 10, 15 years in a San Francisco or a Seattle. And instead of buying a $1 million one bedroom in Silicon Valley, you can buy a pretty nice home on Lake Erie with that. So that's a pretty fascinating, I think, sales pitch for a lot of people. It's just, you know, how can we help develop that and make those soft entries a little bit easier? Because if you're an accomplished tech executive, you know, you've built a good career, and it can be tough to leave that. So I think collectively there's a lot more all of us can do and are doing to help attract that. But as we're coming up on an hour, I just wanted to thank folks in the Q&A in the chat. So feel free if you want to try to get in another question or so. But as we look to wrap up, maybe a final parting idea or phrase. And one thing we like to do on our podcast and some of our interviews that OhioX puts out is offer a prediction, because part of what we're trying to do is help build Ohio's future through technology and innovation. And so that could be perhaps about your individual companies, about the city itself, or about just some of the opportunities we've discussed with today. But maybe, Kris, if you want to go first and offer any kind of final thoughts that we haven't got to, or share anything about your company news, perhaps, that we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, I think from my perspective and from a Proformex perspective, and Jacob actually mentioned this, over half of our team have worked together in other successful tech startups, whether they're here or in other areas. And so we're really not only focused on, changing the life insurance industry through our software, but also building a company that helps seed the next generation of entrepreneurs and leaders here in Cleveland. And so, when we can, all of our executives and myself included, try to network with Ohioans and Clevelanders that we know that are working in other areas, and tell them about what we're doing. I mean, I've had a couple of interviews with some folks in different areas, and they're looking to come back, right? And so I think also, if we can't place them, I spend a lot of time, connecting them with other entrepreneurs or other, tech startups in Cleveland. And so I think they're maybe just formalizing some of that, or creating a group that, maybe OhioX is it, that really looks at that, because I think the boomerang, is a real thing. And I think now, given just the trends that you're seeing in terms of people working more remotely, there is a time to leverage that, and it might be good to see that really motivated into action.
Great. Thank you, Kris. Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, and so similarly, I mean, I think that success cycle is really valuable. And so, we work with a lot of startups. I mean, that's not the majority of our revenue, because they're startups, but we do spend a lot of time with startups locally who are looking to build their first product, or who I just advise or provide some mentorship for, because I think that's kind of the future of the region is going to come from, those future exits and outcomes, as Christy said. And so that's exciting for me. It's exciting for the team. My team likes to work on cool technology. And so the other thing I would just call out about the region is we partner with a lot of other companies. We know what we do really well, but we also know the folks in the region who do what they do well. And so we find that a lot of our work is through partnerships with other companies in the region. So like, even if it's not something we can deliver by ourselves, that there are companies that can come together that we've worked with at a number of different customers, where it's maybe 2 or 3 companies that are delivering a end-to-end solution. And I think that's another thing that's really valuable here, is that the fact that we are kind of Midwesterners, we're willing to kind of swallow our egos and embrace what we're good at and who we can work with to bring the total solution for the best result.
Thank you, Jacob. Justin?
I think when you look back in this moment right now, and let's say 10 years ahead of time, in 2030, the story will be that mid-sized cities led America towards an economic recovery. And if Cleveland has all the assets and ability to lead that narrative, but we got to have a sense of urgency. We have to, really be bold about our ability to lead. And, I think we have all the ability to do that. And so I'm optimistic we can do it, but we got to have a sense of urgency, because we have a finite amount of time and Cleveland can't wait.
Thank you, Justin. Doug?
I agree with everything that's been said. The one thing I guess I would add is I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for technology professionals to engage and start or stay or build their careers with startups and entrepreneurial type businesses. I hear a lot of people that come to me looking for opportunities, and they want, hey, who do you know at Eaton or Progressive or the big enterprise shops, right? So I think some of the individuals that are on this panel, they're excellent leaders, they're world-class people, And I think if there's anything that I can do to help, or I could use some help, is to help build that network, that awareness in the community that these companies are also great places to start, build, and extend your career. So I think that's something that we need to work on as a community, because there's many, many, many more of those types of companies than there are the enterprise shops, if you will. So I'm looking for some feedback and advice on that. So anybody that's either on the call or on the panel that wants to go offline, I'd love to hear your ideas, because that's something that I feel like I can improve on and help contribute to the growth of the region.
Well, thank you, Doug. And yeah, please, one of the things we hope that comes out of this is, and I hope it's okay with everyone, but find Kris and Jacob and Doug and Justin on LinkedIn or Twitter and connect with them. Because I think that's precisely right, Doug, of just showcasing. And that's one of the things we hope out of events like this. We can help tell the stories of more companies, people that are building Ohio's future through technology and innovation. And to echo Justin and others, that the time is now, and there's an incredible timing to it and an opportunity that comes with that for Ohio and cities like Cleveland. So thank you to our panelists, first and foremost, for sharing your work, sharing your wisdom. We're just at about an hour now. Thank you to everyone who attended. This was the first one. Every week, we're going to be having more of these. So if you're interested in hearing what other cities are up to, because that's one of the things that we can hope connect Cleveland to Columbus and Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, Youngstown, et cetera, and better connect our state, increase opportunities within Ohioans and for Ohioans by Ohioans. And so if you're interested in learning more about more events through our tech tour, you can go to ohiox.org/tech tour. On us in general, it's just OhioX. And thank you to Kris, Jacob, Doug, and Justin for sharing the stories of yourself and companies. And lastly, thank you to HMB, the company that sponsored this. OhioX is a nonprofit, so their support in helping put on this series is absolutely vital. And so we're greatly appreciative to our partners at HMB for all of their work and allowing us to do events like these. And again, as we wrap up, thank you to everyone who joined, and a special thank you to our panelists. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a good day and stays healthy and safe. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.